You're listening to the Nerd to Know Media Network. Join us at nerdtoknowmedia.com.
Broadcasting from the Blanchardstown Centre, this is Phoenix FM.
This is 92.5 Phoenix FM, community radio for Dublin 15.
Hey everybody, it's JB Jeremy Borash, and you are listening to Darragh O'Connor on the...
Welcome to the Wrestling Rewind, the only wrestling podcast by fans who don't hate wrestling.
Hello everybody, you're listening to Phoenix 92.5 FM. This is the Wrestling Rewind. My name is Darragh O'Connor and I'm joined by the one, the only, the undefeated 1-0, Mr. Martin Hardy. How are things, Martin?
Just living as an undefeated, undisputed and unchallenged champion. I think we're up to, what is this? Is this week 20 now of that coward CM Punk not even responding to our repeated challenges for a fair, simple, straightforward scrap.
And I wouldn't mind, he went through all the hassle to get a rematch for a belt that he was fairly beaten for. And
3
now,
minutes.
3 minutes. I'm like, sorry man, he lost.
No wonder he went to UFC. It's only 3-minute rounds. That's
nothing.
Actually, I just before we came online, I finished watching Dynamite, and I am mega hyped for All Out. I cannot wait for All Out.
It's going to be very good. So this weekend we decided to, obviously we have our WCW timeline to finish out. So next week what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 sets of live shows. So if you guys listen to on Phoenix FM, go over to Nerd to Know Media right now and you can find there all the details for the streams. We're going to start streaming at 10:30 on Friday, and we're going to do 2 hours. We're going to do All Out and we're going to do Clash of the Castle because we want to give them an hour each. They're going to be huge shows, and it would be wrong to squash them into one show, and it also would be wrong to cover them now because it's not really much point. So we're going to do them both next week. So if you're listening to us on Phoenix FM or indeed on the internet, please go over to Nerd to Know Media now and you can join us next week where we'll be doing it live. We might even throw up some events or something, Martin.
Yes, and I'd like to throw out a cast guarantee, a solemn pledge to any of the people who caught us on the live stream last week that I will be both coherent and aware
so
when we review Clash of the Castle and All Out.
So for anyone who doesn't know, the last live stream we had was what I'm now calling our drunk cast, where one or both of us gets intoxicated and we just have a good time, which is what we did. And I thought it was a really fun show. So next week will not be a drunk cast; it'll be a regular live stream.
Old live stream.
A regular old live stream. But again, we'll hopefully be taking calls, but we'll also be taking chats as well. So if you want to be involved, please do join us next week. Our social media as well. If you go over to Nerd to Know Media, you can find the links to everything you need to know there.
Absolutely. So, and if you happen to know either of our addresses and you're very fast in the car, you can drop us in a handwritten letter.
Don't do that, though. Don't do that. We don't have a P.O. box. But what we do
I have a post box.
Do you have a P.O. box or just a regular post box at home?
I don't even have a post box. I have a hole in the door, flap, that if the wind even farts, the flap rattles all night.
Well, this week we have 2 very special shows to get to, and they're special not because they're good, but because they're the last ones. This is
although I'd say they're not bad.
They're not bad. No, they're not. And we'll kind of get into that. I mean, we will probably redo Greed at some point because there's a lot to say, but a lot of the points we'll be talking about.
What are you saying, Darragh? You saying my deep insight the other week wasn't as professional as you'd like it to be?
No, I just feel bad because you had so many notes and we didn't cover any of them.
I did. Do you know what? This is classic. This used to happen when I did stand-up comedy. I would write out this perfectly curated set with, the jokes leading into each other, and then a big joke at the end that tied back to the joke at the start. And then I'd have a load of pints waiting for my set, and I'd walk up there, and between the curtain and the microphone, my mind would just go blank, and I'd get up and I'd waffle for 15 minutes, and then I'd get off the stage, wouldn't remember a thing that I said, and people would look at my notes and go, "Oh God, no, you didn't say any of this."
Didn't say any of this. Oh my God. But the thing about it is, it's like, a lot of stuff that I think we would have covered on that show, we're going to say tonight as well, because it does kind of tie in together. Like it really is a sad state of affairs, the end of WCW. Not because it's bad. It's because it turned such a corner that's like, damn, this is actually not bad, to the point it's extremely watchable. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at the last episode of Thunder, which was Thunder 156 from March 2001. March 21, 2001, and the last ever Nitro from March 26th, 2001, Nitro 288, aka Night of Champions. So these kind of, again, they feed directly into each other. They tie up a lot of storylines from Greed, and then kind of go into just a really weird show. I don't want to talk about Nitro just yet, because that's kind of its own thing. Let's talk about Thunder. So the first,
but just very quickly there before we get into Thunder.
Sure.
The day after Greed, there was another Nitro.
There was, yeah.
I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I just wanted to point out some of the bigger things from it. So one of the things I really loved about the second last Nitro was that it opened with a kind of a in memoriam trailer, like an in memoriam video for DDP, and apparently this is something Big Papa Pump had been doing for all the guys he'd sort of beaten and retired. So I hadn't seen those, so I really liked that. But the doubly hilarious thing was that the one for DDP had, all these lovely images of him fading in and out with this great music, but the background was just a trailer park. And the other big thing that happened was so Dusty Rhodes and Dustin Rhodes, if you remember from Greed, had this kiss my ass thing with Jeff Jarrett and Ric Flair.
Yes. And
at the end of the second last Nitro, Dusty Rhodes and Dustin Rhodes beat them again. They were like, "And now, Daddy Flair, it's time for you to kiss my ass." And he went backstage and they brought out a donkey. So it was literally, it was kiss my ass. And they dragged down Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett by the hair and slammed their faces into this donkey's arse, which I thought was great. And speaking as a farmer, having been kicked by more than one cow, fair play to them, because I wouldn't like to come up behind a donkey that wasn't expecting it.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Not that the donkeys in South Armagh be expecting it. But I just thought, I was watching it, I was like, there was one or two good matches. Nothing really we've reviewed from the whole time with WCW has been a great match, in ring. You go, wow, 5 stars. But there was a few good matches. There was a couple of good segments, and then it ended with this big, ridiculous donkey kissing thing. And I was just thinking to myself, man, if they had shown just a little bit of humility, and if they'd said, look, we had a great run, but Raw's on top, Raw's likely to be on top for the future, and we're going to, say, do a WCW rebrand and move Nitro to a Wednesday night, something like that, I would watch this. Back in the day, I would never have watched this instead of Raw. But if this is on a different night, I would have watched this, So it's like you were saying earlier, there's a tinge of sadness to this.
Well, what's funny about that is that's kind of what happened. For people in the UK and Ireland, the only way you could watch, and again, like this was 20 years ago, the only way you could actually watch Nitro was on a Friday, the same time as Raw on a Friday, and it'd actually be on pretty much around the same time. I think it was on Bravo, the old channel Bravo, which I think was owned by Spike. I'm not too sure, but yeah, that's the only way you could actually watch Nitro at a certain point, was to watch it on the same time on a Friday. So I mean, even when they were replaying it, they didn't have that awareness to be like, maybe don't put it on at the exact same time. There's no reason for it to be on at the exact same time. So yeah, I mean, that's how you watched it over here back in the day.
WCW at that time, like, I know things are very different now with the internet and streaming and all that. Yeah. But back then, WCW was still getting good numbers. Like, WCW was getting numbers promotions nowadays would kill for.
Yeah, like, okay, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do think it was either like high 2 or 3.
Yeah,
like Raw doesn't even get that now.
No, and they were getting that with Raw on at the same time. So if they had to move to a different night, like 50% of that fan base would have still said, it's Wednesday, I'll stick WCW on, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, because there is a lot there, and Nitro in particular had a lot of good things in it, which, you know, in a weird way, we've deprived ourselves in a sense of just watching the pay-per-views, but for better or worse, I think that was a smart decision to do, particularly during the dregs. But this product, watching this week to week, would have been a much different experience than even 6 months ago when you were watching, you know, 6 months ago in the mid 2000s when it was really bad. And I can only imagine how bad that show actually was to watch this week.
There's lessons in this for wrestling today.
Which they didn't follow.
No, well, hopefully for the likes of Tony Khan and Triple H. A wrestling rivalry is good. Wrestling rivalry is good for everyone. A wrestling war is stupid, and is stupid for everyone. And, you know, even if you're winning the war by 90%, still 10% of an audience that you're just like not picking up. And I think we talk about it more when we do the final Nitro, but in particular, the way WWF treated WCW fans, it was like they didn't want their money. It was the dumbest stuff.
Well, it was ego. You know, that was it. It was just 100% ego. And I think the thing that will change now, and even, you know, not to date this podcast, because obviously the goal is to look back, not to look now. But even with Vince McMahon gone, I think that mentality is finished. You know,
hopefully,
you know, because Triple H again doesn't seem like a kind of guy who's interested in playing that kind of game. Tony Khan, you know, he did the Forbidden Door pay-per-view, like, legitimately. So
said he'd be open to a Forbidden Door type thing with WWE,
which they should do. I mean, that would make a lot of sense. You know, go 50-50, tons of money. And I do think we'll see that at some point in time. I really do.
I genuinely hope so, because, right, see the Wednesday Night War stuff, that was kind of fun when both shows were on at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a direct competition. And everyone kind of knew it had a time limit on it. Like, both shows weren't going to be on at the same time, you know, forever. Like, either AEW was going to fail or WWE were going to go, we're only hurting our own development brand here. So there was kind of a time limited amount to crack to that. See this now, people putting up, like, you know, the figures from SmackDown and the figures from Rampage and going, oh, you know, another. Am I the only one? Does anyone else find this stuff just tedious now, just boring? Like, you want to go online and say, oh, what about this? What does everyone think is going to happen on Raw? What does everyone think is going to happen on Clash? What does everyone think is going to happen on All Out? And it's 2 tweets before it devolves into the same goddamn in the mud stuff.
Yeah, look, it's tribalism, you know, and the thing about tribalism is no one benefits from it. You know, if you're not willing to sit there and go, hey, I'm willing to give this a chance. And that's the thing, it doesn't happen. And, you know, it's funny to have lived through. And again, like, a lot of wrestling fans who are doing this probably either didn't watch wrestling then, were 8. or whatever, you know. I mean, the internet was a thing, but we didn't really have the internet in a usable way until 2002-ish, 2000, like in a real way. I think I had the internet in 1999, 2000, but it wasn't, you couldn't stream something on it. You had to like download it to a floppy disk or something. I remember going on WWE.com actually in 1999, and it was not fun. But I mean, that's the thing, you know, when people are not willing to listen to each other or try something, you know, they're doing themselves over, and it seems like it's happening again. Because, you know, obviously we lived through the Monday Night Wars, and then, you know, a lot of people.
I love that. We lived through the Monday Night Wars.
We did. Well, you know, as someone who was in the trenches for Impact Wrestling, TNA, I also lived through that as well.
See, I didn't live through the TNA things. That I didn't watch TNA as much, but did live through the Monday Night Wars and did live through the Troubles. So we're kind of even. We've both lived through 2 wars.
But the reason why I bring up the Impact one is because a lot of the toxicity that would happen now with AEW fans has already happened. I'm like, oh, that doesn't benefit anybody. You know,
did Impact get a lot of this stuff?
A lot, yeah, it did. Yeah, that's why. Like, even when you know, some people wondering, oh, Darragh, why are you so hesitant to support AEW? I'm like, no, I'm not hesitant to support AEW. I've already been here. I've seen this happen. Now, to be fair, AEW's done a lot better.
You've been hurt before.
Yeah, and it just doing the stupid, you know, WWE bashing for no reason doesn't benefit anybody, because it just, you know, now what happened with TNA was they completely lost the run of themselves and went off into the stratosphere and then came back. So they're not doing that in AEW, at least. AEW was run a hell of a lot better. But it is funny to see that no matter what happens, when they settle into tribalism, it ends the same way. And that's exactly what happened with WCW, where WWE fans were conditioned to hate WCW. Like, vehemently hate it, or even see it as worthless. So when they did bring it over, it was perceived as worthless. They damaged their own brand before they even bought it, which is crazy.
Exactly.
Crazy.
And here, what's like the number one rule of wrestling promo?
You never bury your opponent.
Yeah, you berate your opponent. You talk about your opponent's morality. Talk about your issues with them. You talk about they're a goddamn hell of a fighter, but they're not a hell of a man, and I'm gonna kick the living hell out of them, whatever it is. But you don't say they're crap.
No. Yeah. Because then what's the point? Oh, he's a jobber. I'll beat him in 5 minutes. Well, why would I watch the show? Why would I watch the match?
But,
you know, it's
even for your character, if the guy you're fighting's crap and you beat him, so
you didn't do anything.
Just beat a crap guy. Yeah. And then if he beats you, well, you're out the window. Like,
here's the thing, right? Triple H, and Mankind, right? That's how you do promos. Yeah. I would show that feud to anybody and go, look, see what Triple H is saying about Mick? Because he could have said anything about Mick to run him down. But he's like, no.
You're a fat piece or...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All that kind of stuff. But no, the way he went was, he goes, you know, he's a very dangerous competitor. You know, you're going to take it to the limit, but I will beat you.
But he's not a champion. Yeah,
exactly. And that's how you do it. But but that requires a certain amount of humility. And with Vince McMahon running WWE at the time, or even the WWE, because dude, you know, we've gone back and we've watched some of the shows from the Attitude Era. There was that open hostility where it was like everything WWE is bad, everything, you know.
But it speaks to the pettiness of McMahon.
Very petty, absolutely, yeah.
Who would, you know, laud himself around the world, and others would laud him as just like a really shrewd businessman.
Yeah.
You know,
which look, to be fair, he was, but then he'd do stuff like this and cost him millions.
As a shrewd business decision, maybe don't run the company that you just bought into the ground. You know, like imagine Tony Khan coming out going, I just bought Ring of Honor, and as you all know, Ring of Honor's a load of crap.
It's terrible.
You should never watch Ring of Honor. And whenever I launch the AEW network with all these Ring of Honor matches on it, you definitely shouldn't watch them. Like,
it's crazy. Like, the thing, it's a thing of its time. What's more crazy is WWE was a publicly traded company in 2001, right?
Was it 2001 when they went public?
I think they went public in 2000. I'm going to check that actually on IPO.
PLC.
Yeah, 1999 is when they became, is when their IPO was, right? So I just can't believe the stock holders were like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop. But then again, they weren't able to unseat him. Like, a lot of the changes that we're having now in the WWE are only happening because Vince isn't there.
Oh,
so
all the changes we're seeing, you know,
it's crazy, right? It's like watching a different show. It's like a completely different show. It's unbelievable. It really is.
What always got me was the story about how McMahon was going to do Monday Nitro, and he was going to focus all the WWF stuff on SmackDown.
Yeah, and that would have worked actually.
That would have been amazing because it would have been like
a
genuine fundamental shift. Like, people would have been like, this is seismic. You know, even if you know it wasn't great, you'd tune in just to see it. And that he cancelled all that because Booker T and Buff Bagwell had a bad match. And
the match wasn't even bad though. That's the thing. Like, that match,
match fine. It was TV.
Yeah, I think
2.5-star TV match. Look, but the point was, like, I was looking at that going, I'm like, we've never had any stinkers on Raw in 25 years.
Here's the thing, right? On these shows, right? Let's just go with the Nitro there that we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
Buff Bagwell's not the person I would lead with. And I liked Buff Bagwell. I thought it was hilarious, right? You know, Bam Bam. Pay for Bam Bam.
Oh.
Bring him in with Booker T. Get Scott Steiner in with Booker T. Literally redo the main event of Night of Champions. Why didn't they do that?
And it's like, do you know what it reminds me of?
Buff Bagwell was a terrible decision. Sorry, no disrespect to Buff Bagwell, but
it reminds me of the Resident Evil movies.
Or the new show.
Oh, well, that was a whole other level of. But the point is, with any Resident Evil media, I don't know how to get it wrong. All the goddamn work has been done for you. You have a built-in fan base. You have a built-in story. You have a built-in lore. You can't get this wrong. That's the same when WWF bought WCW. It's like, you have such an amazing history here. Like everybody thinks WCW and they think 2000, 2001. WCW goes right back to the 80s.
Does, yeah.
And from then until 2000, I mean, there's a treasure trove of brilliant stuff in there.
But look, right, to that point, right, the last Nitro and even the last Thunder, which is, look, it has problems, has a lot of problems, yeah. but it also has two really good matches. It has the Young Dragons and Air Raid, which, by the way, features AJ Styles, a very, very young AJ Styles. Dave is losing his mind right now. And
Dave, where are you?
Exactly, we're talking about your boy. Come on.
Sometime, Dave, you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that you picked your child over AJ Styles.
But the thing about it is, if they had just went, right, we're going to book Raw, we're going to, our first Raw is going to have that. You could probably pick those up pennies on their contracts probably came with them. So you would have had them. You could have just, done that. Mike Awesome, you had his contract. Rick Steiner, Canyon, who was in the Invasion, right? Jeff Jarrett, now fair enough. Jeff Jarrett was never getting hired again after what happened. So it took 20 years to do that. And, it was what it was. Scott Steiner's contract was there. So,
McMahon,
there you go.
Don't be petty. If it is literally
it started off. So on the Nitro, on the simulcast, that's okay, right? We'll get to that. We'll get to that point.
Yeah,
we will get to that point. But speaking of, okay, hold on, we're jumping ahead. But look, the Thunder Real 156, right? That Young Dragons Air Raid match is brilliant.
Great.
Absolutely brilliant. Great. And I'm just like, wow, they had this still at its death door. They had this.
The thing was, at the time, WWF had nothing like this.
No. They did not. No.
If there's one thing, even at its absolute lowest depths, if there's one thing WCW always had over WWF was WCW's cruiserweight division was must see. WWF's light heavyweight was piss break stuff.
Yeah, it was. And the interesting point on that is, like, you wouldn't see this in the WWE. This never translated over. A lot of this went into TNA, and TNA picked this right up. Obviously, not just picking up AJ Styles, but that kind of ethos where it's like, our thing here is the cruiserweights, is athletic competition. So you can kind of see, basically, to put not too fine of a point on it, WCW in 2001 very much is early TNA.
Yeah, very
much so. Without some of the bigger talents, but a lot of the bigger talents weren't there. The biggest talent on the show, on Thunder, was Scott Steiner and Jeff Jarrett.
Did you not feel though that once WCW, even though they didn't do it to do so, it all happened by accident and fallouts and drama backstage. Once they had cut out the rot, got rid of Russo, got rid of Hogan, got rid of Nash, all the guys who were backstage politicking and putting themselves forward and all that, and they didn't have those big names to lean on anymore. They had to concentrate on their own guys. I found it a much more refreshing show to watch.
Same. Now, to be fair, I will say, and I will be very blunt, there is a distinct lack of star power. But to be honest with you, that star power wasn't Hogan, it wasn't Hall, and it even wasn't Nash. It really wasn't. So,
and in terms of star power, I thought they did a hell of a job. Not the best wrestler in the world, but I thought they did a hell of a job making Scott Steiner feel
like a huge star.
Why WWF? Like, I get why they were wrong, but I get why they did away with 90% of WCW contracts. But man, there are some absolute brain farts they made with guys that should have been brought in big.
Now, an interesting thought experiment, right? Just say WWE, because let's say WWE bought WCW, right? And they didn't do that. And they were going to launch Nitro instead of Raw, right? Scott Steiner, Booker T, they are your top two guys, which they would have been, right? They absolutely would have been.
Yeah.
You could plug in a Chris Jericho, a Benoit, and you have a Kurt Angle.
These are guys. Well, apart from Angle, these are guys who have real WCW history, like a year ago.
Yeah, but also they were there doing some of their best work, and they actually could have gotten the mix there, had the belt, and it's just it's crazy to think that it was just there because, like as I said, the lack of star power was a thing that would have been solved by WWE by literally just going, oh, let's just take some of the lads, plug them in there. There you go. The problem fixed itself.
Imagine the invasion. Imagine the invasion coming in, and Benoit going on a run of just murdering WCW guys, going like,
"Is my belt?
I'm the last WCW champion.
I never
lost that title.
I never lost.
I never dropped that title to anybody. Yeah. You're a goddamn phony," and just murdering lads.
That would be unreal. That would be unreal.
And there's a million stories like that there in the invasion.
Yeah, and then you can have. But here's the thing: you could also have Benoit goes off and does that run. Then you have Jericho going, "I was never given this opportunity. That's my belt."
Yeah, I tell you what. Apart from somebody going back in the past and applying super strength super glue to Vince McMahon's zipper, the invasion is the biggest missed opportunity in all of wrestling history.
It's up there. It very much is up there. Like it's one of the things where you're like, if Vince McMahon hadn't have been in charge of the WWE, if the invasion happened now, it would have been very different. And you can kind of see it as, or if it had happened, actually, WCW had won the war. it probably would have been very different as well. And I do believe that. I genuinely do believe it. WCW had to win the war. Fans probably would have got what they wanted. But with WWE winning the war, with Vince being there, he got what he wanted, and it wasn't good. It really wasn't.
But the thing was, neither of these companies had a day.
No.
Just one of them had to show an ounce of humility and go, look, we're not about, fighting with WWF. We're about the WCW world title, and we're moving to, make it a whole rebrand thing.
But
don't even admit that it's because of WWF. Go WCW Nitro now on Wednesdays, whatever.
But the thing about it, and look, we'd be remiss to say this because we can't just lay the blame at egos of, wrestling promoters. The reality is, and this is in the Death of WCW, which is a great book, by the way. I don't know if you read it, Martin, but it is a really good book.
Yeah.
And I'd recommend everyone listening now to go and buy it. It's everywhere.
And read it, because there will be questions on it next week.
It's Brian Everett's book. It is a fantastic read. And the truth of it is that WCW wasn't wanted on their network.
Yeah.
And that's what killed WCW. It wasn't Vince Russo. It wasn't. They were like, we want you gone. And Vince just bought a pennies on the dollar because it wasn't worth anything.
I think it's partly that. Look,
it's completely that.
Now, if WCW had of, as I said, moved nights and still had a respectable audience, and they gotten rid of Russo, they gotten rid of Hogan, they gotten rid of the guys who were costing them, $5 million a year, whatever it was, and they weren't bleeding money anymore, and they had repositioned themselves as, look, we're not trying to fill 15,000, 20,000 seater stadiums every night anymore.
You know what? As well,
they could have been like purely business. They could have been an asset to TNT.
Well, TNT didn't want them. Sadly, they're 2 years out from the internet being stable, right?
Yeah.
Because what could have happened is, because this is what TNA did. They could have went online, survived for a couple of years until they got bought by Spike. And that's exactly what TNA did. It's just unfortunate that they were in that gap when the internet wasn't stable enough to host something like a video platform. Because YouTube, I think, was 2005, 2006. And streaming. Good luck. Streaming wouldn't be for another 10 years at this point. So, I mean, TV really was where, what they wanted. But with Turner, with the Time Warner deal, it was only a matter of time before they collapsed. I mean, look, if once TV is pulled, even in modern day wrestling, once TV is pulled, the wrestling brand isn't worth anything.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. Well, I think your man from Smashing Pumpkins would disagree with that.
Well, look how much money he's lost. On that. There's one point where you're hemorrhaging money. Like, there's a good wrestling, well, not good wrestling motion, but a good cautionary tale. Wrestlelicious, it was called. It was this guy, he won the US Lotto, and he bought like a wrestling promotion and just lost every penny into it. I cannot
imagine a worse use of
lotto. It's something else, and you can see it, guys. You can follow. I tell you what, if you want us to cover it, do let us know. Send us an email or do it on social media, and we will cover Wrestlelicious. But yeah, he lost everything. He lost everything in it because, again, there was no TV. It was just and that's the thing. Wrestling as it exists, and I think we are going to move away from it with the streaming services because obviously, they don't really need TV anymore. But as a quick, secure revenue source, TV still's where it's at, and it particularly wasn't 2000.
And even the other way around, for a television station, wrestling, like nothing else, produces X amount of hours every week, low cost. Like, even if wrestling over the course of the year costs a lot of money, it week to week it actually doesn't. You're getting X amount of hours of broadcast, and you don't have to worry about it. There's the block for wrestling every week. It's got an inbuilt fan base. It's fairly low cost to produce. It's a tremendous asset for any broadcast company to have, because the likes of, I don't know, The Walking Dead, you know, Game of Thrones, might cost 100 million to make a season, and it's only on your network for 10 weeks. You still have 42 weeks to fill, you know, whereas wrestling is there every week with an inbuilt audience.
Even during the pandemic, the only thing that was still on was wrestling. Now, it was that weird performance art wrestling, which I really actually liked a great deal. It was like watching a weird play. But
there is, you know what we'll do? If we're still doing this in 10 years, we need to do an arc about the pandemic.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Once we've gotten over the PTSD.
Yeah, once it's a distant memory and not like...
Everyone's ready to laugh about it.
Oh, do you remember that time when we lost 2 years of our life, wasn't it, guys?
Some good wrestling, though, wasn't there?
Some good wrestling.
God, do you remember Kenny Omega putting on 5-star bangers in front of 5 people?
Okay, fair enough. You're on in 10 years. We'll come back to it. Right.
But to me, I know we're going to get back to Thunder very quickly, but just to get your thoughts on this, like, and again, not to tie our old school review too much into modern wrestling, but what you were saying about broadcasting and about streaming and about online, do you agree with me, or what's your view on Ring of Honor? Because I don't think Ring of Honor is going to get a TV deal.
It doesn't need it.
And I think a Ring of Honor online show would actually gain a really, not a huge audience, but a loyal, rabid audience.
I agree with you. Like, the difference, AEW absolutely needed a TV deal, right, to establish itself.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If AEW's TV deal is gone, that's it. They're done. Right, they're 100% finished because
their whole thing is that they're big time. They're an alternative.
Yeah, but also, there's only so much money you can pump into it, right? Because TNA, that's what happened. TNA, Panda Energy, they were just hoofing money in, and it was just disappearing, right? Even with the TV deal. So, again, I nearly wrote a book on TNA, and only for the fact that they somehow managed to survive, I didn't have to. So, thank God, because I was regretting that more and more. It was happening. Like, this book's going to be thousands of pages, and it'll kill me.
You've got it in you, man.
I do, but I don't want to do it, though. So that's the thing.
I do.
But anyway, maybe we'll see if there's interest. But yeah, so that's kind of.
If you write a book on TNA, I'll write a book on Phoenix Wrestling.
Fair. Which is still sad that that's gone. Actually, that's a massive bummer.
Heartbroken.
That interview, by the way, is up on our
stream. All the lads in Phoenix Wrestling and all the Irish indie wrestlers in the Irish indie scene.
Absolutely,
that's lads. And lasses.
And the interview is up on our Nerd to Know Media stream as well, if you guys want to check it out. Yeah. But I agree, man. I think like the difference between an AEW main brand, a WWE main brand, or whatever is because that's the main brand, that's the flagship. Flagship is always going to need TV because it's just one of those things where you're like, it gives that seal of approval, it gives that big time feel. Even if it means nothing, if nobody watches, it's still a thing and people will always watch. And then there are those casual fans where you're in a bar and wrestling's on, it's just going to always have that appeal, right? Now with NXT, it's the same, doesn't need a TV deal, and the same with Ring of Honor, really doesn't, because they have their streaming service, they have the flagship already covered, and it will find its audience. People will know, well, look, this is not AEW, this is its own thing. The exact thing that happened with NXT is what will happen with Ring of Honor. And the death nail of good NXT was when it got a TV deal. Because it was completely 100%. So.
I was so annoyed because I had only recently, before AEW appeared and NXT made the move and all that, I'd only actually found NXT about 6 months before that.
That's upsetting.
And I was... NXT is the reason I didn't give up on WWE 6 months earlier than I did.
Right.
Like, WWE was the stuff I kind of watched, Tuesday, a recording of Raw, sort of eating me dinner, a few drinks, skipping through the half of it, blah, 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 on my phone. NXT was what I sat and watched.
Yeah.
And then they bloody ruined that as well.
Well, that's you have to be able to, you have to know your product. And there's certain things you can do on stream that you can never do on television because it's an old medium and it's not going to fly. Even if it is, like WWE isn't PG anymore now. It's 13s, but still.
No, it's still PG.
Yeah, but they're.
No, there was. It's
not hard PG, and it's.
In terms of what they're actually presenting, but loads of people were upset about this, but I think it came out last week that those kind of discussions about it moving to TV 14 had, and I'm sure Triple H pushed for it, but apparently they came to nothing. Like the network and Nick Khan and all that were like, nah, the money's in PG.
But see, that was exactly the point I was going to make. Even if it is 13, they're still not going to push that boat out too far, because guess what? You make a lot more money when kids can watch your show and harass their parents to buy 4 t-shirts rather than 1.
Yeah.
And that's good business. So you're never going to get that product on TV because, it's not going to happen. Even with AEW, I mean, if AEW get to the point where they are the size of the WWE, at some point they're going to be like, yeah, we can make a lot more money appealing to kids than we can to adults.
Honest to God, I say this as probably the number one AEW fan in Ireland. If getting to WWE's level of success means dropping down to WWE's level of quality, I hope AEW are number 2 forever. And it goes back to what I was saying about WCW, is that WCW could have been a really lucrative, really worthwhile company if they had just accepted that they were number 2.
Yeah.
There's no harm in being number 2.
No.
In a multi-million-dollar industry.
But that was TNA's, and I am calling them TNA, not Impact Wrestling, because Impact Wrestling have accepted that, and they have a really, really, really cool little niche for themselves, which makes them arguably one of the best shows you can watch. It's a nice, tidy little show that you watch every week, and it's grand, right? Like, it's fine. But what TNA did is they wasted millions of dollars trying to trace a dream that was never going to happen. And I remember having that conversation with Dixie Carter. Had it on the show to an extent, but actually when I was talking to her, and she goes, what did you think of the show? Just actually when Drew won the belt, and I was like, here's all the things you need to fix. And she just didn't listen. I'm like, well, I genuinely tried. So I was just like, okay. So it's lovely though. Lovely woman, genuinely. A lovely woman. Everyone in that company is so nice. But, at a certain point in time, you are just talking to the wall, and you're like, all right,
But isn't it mad that wrestling is like the only industry where it's number 1 or dead? Like, no one would ever go, Pepsi, you're never going to sell as many cans as Coke. You might as well just shut down. Shut down.
You're done now.
And Pepsi's going, no, we're still making like billions of dollars. We're not making as much as Coke, but like, why would we shut down?
But like, you're 100% right. Market share is a thing, but you don't need to be being number 1 is great. But also you can, by being like, that's the whole thing about, well, I know for some people it's a dirty word, but capitalism, that's how it works. If there's just one monopoly and no one is trying to differentiate, you're only going to be left with that monopoly. And that's what happened with the WWE, because everybody basically destroyed themselves by trying to beat the WWE instead of just popping out these alternatives. It made it impossible to actually change anything,
Yeah.
Like, here's the thing, right? There's a very high possibility ECW was funded by WWE. They pretty much said it, right? That's it's kind of a high level secret at this point where everybody knows that, right? But that still had its own thing, and that actually fulfilled its purpose. So when that went under, it was going under anyway. WCW wasn't in that kettle of fish. So when they eventually went back around, went up with the NWA and set up TNA, if they had just done what you said, where they were just an alternative to WWE, had their own issue, and for the first 6 years, they kind of were. The wheels fell off in about 2008. But up until that point, they were like, yeah, this is grand. You know, they were like a bit of ECW and a bit of WCW. And, you know, that's exactly how I described it to Dixie Carter. And she was like, yeah, that's what we're going for. And then Hulk Hogan showed up. And that's when we had the problem with TNA.
I can't believe...
Because then what happened was they tried to become the WWE and lost all their identity.
I can't believe this stuff with Dixie Carter. Like, she didn't listen. Like, is she not aware that you are the voice of the #1 wrestling radio program on Phoenix FM in Dublin?
At this point, it was just working for the Sun. So let's, you know, I was just many of reporters that were in the room. That's all.
The Sun.
Yeah.
My
for years.
God.
Yeah.
My sister's marrying a fella from Liverpool. He slapped the head of you. Telling us the Irish Sun. It's different.
No, it wasn't even. It was the English Sun.
Oh God. Oh.
But yeah, no, I mean, that was it. Like those press meetings were interesting, or those press drinks were interesting, because you had everyone from the tabloids there, and we were all pretty much saying the same thing. But when you're in a room with somebody who's all saying the same thing, you're like, oh man, you know, you could just feel it. Like, it was a really, really cool night, because that's when Drew won the belt. It's when he showed up and he'd done his promo and then won the belt the same night. And it was like, oh man, they're turning the corner. And so that's why it's funny watching these shows, because you're like, oh man, they turned the corner, but then the wheels completely fell off because they were bought, you know. And it's interesting. Like, there's a good phrase: history doesn't repeat itself; it rhymes. And
I like that.
Oh, you're welcome to use it, listeners, and also Martin.
And pretend that it's mine. History doesn't repeat itself; it rhymes.
Yeah, and that's
Martin Hurty.
And that's kind of what happens. You can see it with wrestling as well. Like, you know, like that is exactly what I'm talking about, where it kind of gets better and then just doesn't. And you can see it again and again with this. And so, yeah, jumping back to Thunder, you know, quick results. The Young Dragons defeated Air Raid. Air Raid's a really good name, by the way. I wish that's a cool tag team. Jason.
What is in AEW? What's the team? The two high flying team called? I think they're called something like Air Raid.
Are they not like the Best Friends?
No. I'm thinking of, so they're a great high flying tag team, and then one brother got injured, and the other guy was like, Kane got a singles push, and then the brother came back, and then got injured again.
Unlucky, that's the name.
I think they're at the stage now where because they've been pushing the uninjured brother while the other guy was injured, that I don't think he's coming back at all.
Oh man.
He's in the casino ladder match at All Out. Let me see if I can get his name. Well,
while you look that up, I'm going to run through these. Jason Jett defeats Cash. Ernest the Cat Miller, our boy here on the show, our Bookily, Ernest the Cat Miller, and M.I. Smooth defeated Chris Canyon and Road Warrior Animal. Very weird combination, but that actually was a decent match. Hugh Morris defeats Rick Steiner, which was actually pretty good too. The Filthy Animals of Rey Mysterio and Billy Kidman and Shane Helms, who's moved away from 3 Count, defeated Chavo Guerrero and Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo, and Chuck Palumbo defeats Mike Awesome in a disappointing match. And then, of course, the main event was a 2-on-1 handicap match. Jeff Jarrett and Scott Steiner defeats Dustin Rhodes. Interesting point on this: Dustin Rhodes would actually do a promo in the middle of the ring at the start of the show to tie back to the whole ass kissing thing. So, jumping ahead to go on.
Yes, just before you do it, it's my mistake. They're called Top Flight. It's Dante Martin and his brother. They're called Top Flight. But very quickly, in terms of Thunder, man, do you remember we had this chat the other week about Rick Steiner?
Yes.
And how in my head, like nostalgia had it for me that the dog-faced gremlin was this amazing wrestler.
Yeah.
And then slowly over the period we did this, like that memory was systematically dismantled.
I think you just got them confused. I think you thought Rick Steiner was Scott Steiner.
Well, I had a similar thing for Thunder. I always thought Thunder was great.
Yeah.
And I think it's because Thunder was on a Friday. I mean, I think it was actually on a Thursday, but whenever we got to see it, it was on a Friday. And my auntie had Sky, so I could go down to her house of a Friday night, but I obviously couldn't go down of like a Monday night and set up. So the only WCW I got to see live was Thunder, and I had it in my head that Thunder was this amazing show. It was live, it was exciting, it was brilliant, and yeah, I think this is a bit of a crash-backed reality. Young Dragons versus Air Raid, like you say, great match. The Dustin Rhodes promo with the bag full of stuff was just...
I enjoyed it, but it was also really weird and out of place. Like, what was weird about the two shows, right? The last Thunder and the last Nitro. The last Thunder just was a normal show. It felt like they're just like, oh, we're just going through these storylines.
Bizarre, yeah.
But then when you get to Nitro, they're like, oh, here, we have no idea what's going on. We don't know what's going on. Like, this is not a joke. This is like a serious thing. And you're like, wow, that's so weird. And again, there was no build to what happened on the last Nitro. It's not a cold open, but it's an open saying, hey, look, this is a night like any other. We don't know what's going on. All the championships are on the line, which again is super cool. But it also speaks volumes that the last match wasn't for a belt.
One other thing I'd say about this Thunder was there was a match in it with what is he called? Jet.
Jason Jet.
Jason Jet, and who's Cash. Anyway, the point was Jason Jet had a match on Greed, and he had a match on the last Nitro, and he had a match on this Thunder. And he was an excellent wrestler. Very good. Really, I only seen the 3 of his matches, but I really enjoyed all of them. And it really hit me watching this that, man, there was no way, because he was really talented, he was up and coming, but he wasn't a big name. There was no way his contract was ever going to get picked up by WWF. And there are so many incredibly talented mid-card guys who were only mid-card because they were young, they hadn't built their way up through the business yet, who were lost because North America, despite, like, when you include Canada, despite having 500 million people, apparently isn't big enough for 2 major wrestling promotions. And it was a shame, because there are so many WCW guys who, when the top guys were arshing about and messing about online and doing all this kayfabe, shoot kayfabe rubbish, they were clocking in and killing themselves for 12 minutes and clocking out. And I genuinely think that one of the biggest tragedies about the death of WCW is that there's an entire generation of great wrestlers there who
that nobody saw,
never made it. Like look at today. See, if there's no AEW, there's no Daniel Garcia.
No.
There's no Wheeler Yuta. There's no Dante Martin. There's no Darby Allin.
No.
Like, there's no Acclaimed. Like, there's just dozens of guys. I sit here all night naming guys who would have there's no space for them in one promotion, because of the style it has, and obviously just because of the numbers. But man, there is a whole lost generation of excellent wrestlers here who lost out because apparently 500 million people isn't a big enough audience for 2 goddamn promotions.
Well, speaking of which, at a time there was 2 promotions on Night of Champions, right? So WCW Night of Champions. March 26th, right? Or 26th. The 288 edition of Nitro. So it opens with a World Championship match. A unification match, actually, for the Cruiserweight belt. Well, sorry, for the US belt and the it
opens
belt
with Vince McMahon.
It does. It does open with Vince McMahon.
Which even now, even watching this back on the WWE Network, even watching this back, to see the Nitro opening, to hear Tony Schiavone, blah, 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 and then to see Vince McMahon come on, man, that I was watching that and I was like, this is still, wow.
It's one of the biggest moments in wrestling history that really cannot be, like, it's lost a lot of its impact now because the reference point is kind of gone for a lot of people. Like, even if Vince showed up on AEW, you know, when he was still the chairman, it still wouldn't have been as big of a deal because, you know, it wasn't equal. This was a huge thing. But what was weird about it was the fact that they went with the, like, what do you think about the belts in general, or doing it as a simulcast? Do you think that was a good decision to put the belts on the line and do it as a simulcast?
I'd say two things. I'd say the simulcast was phenomenal. Brilliant. Absolutely ingenious. The thing with Shane McMahon coming out and going, the name does say McMahon, but doesn't say Vince McMahon. The simulcast was incredible. And what I would like to talk about for a minute is the venue of this Nitro was outstanding.
It was very cool. It was it made it look like a massive pay-per-view.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
My only issue with this is they had 2 hours, take out ads.
It's about 40
ads
it's about 40 minutes.
Yeah. Ads in the US are insane. Like,
they are, yeah.
If you have a TV show that's an hour, it's really 40 minutes if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So take out ads. Then McMahon insisted on, between every match, having a 2-minute skit of his own.
Yeah.
And weirdly, going back to earlier what we said about him making petty decisions over really good business decisions, all he ever did in these skits was like run down WCW, run down Florida for some reason, as if WWF never runs events in Florida.
Yeah.
And then, oh man, there was a whole host of matches in this that didn't need to be on it. So you had really great matches being cut down to, I have some of the timings here, literally 3 and 4 minutes, so that we could have, you know, Bam Bam versus Hugh Morris 3. You know, no, nobody asked for that.
But one thing to mention about this, right? So if you're watching the episode of Nitro and you're watching Raw, they're not the same show. Like the actual simulcast, like, stuff happens on Raw that doesn't, like. So for anyone that doesn't know, Vince has 2 televisions set up in his office, right? One has Nitro and one has Raw, right? What he's showing on Nitro sometimes isn't real. It isn't what's happening on the show. So either they're showing a feed, like, there's the very infamous Jeff Jarrett moment where he's like, you know, you used to call yourself JAFF. Well, here's one for you. FIRED, fired, right? And Jeff Jarrett isn't even, I don't even think he's on the show. Like, he's not even on the last Nitro, I don't think, is he? No, he's not.
No, not in the last Nitro.
So they actually put Jeff Jarrett on the way to the ring from archive footage so Vince could do that.
Oh,
That's
God.
how petty. That's how petty he was.
But it goes back to what we were saying about, like, imagine Tony Khan coming out and saying, I've bought Ring of Honor and Ring of Honor's a load of dung. Like,
and then firing Claudio Castagnoli.
Yeah, the gobshite would. But what I don't get is, like, an awesome venue. Like if you're a WWF fan, you're diehard, you've never seen WCW before, you don't want to see WCW. If this was your first experience at WCW, you'd be like, wow, this is something different. This is cool. This is an amazing venue. You know, this is a really good, and they had a really good commentary team.
They did, actually. This is the best WCW commentary team.
If they had taken half these matches, and look, I'm sure some of them was they just wanted to be the good guy. They wanted to get some guys a payday, blah, blah, blah. But half these matches did not need to be in this card because this just snapped through really quickly, because like matches were given like literally 2 minutes at a time. If they had taken the world title, right, the tag titles, the light heavyweight, the cruiserweight title, and the cruiserweight tag, and yeah, give Sting and Flair the match, because that was a lovely bookending of the first ever Nitro match and the last Nitro match. But if you're going to do the first ever Nitro match and the last Nitro match are the same with, you know, the fairly aging Sting and Flair, that's the match that should have 3 minutes. Not the world title match, not the tag title match, not the cruiserweight title match. That's the match that should be just about the entrances and everybody get their stuff in, and then the two guys hugging the ring and blah, blah, blah. That's the match that should have been cut down in time.
Well, here's the weird thing, right? So when you're watching the show, like obviously, again, when you read the book, it seems like nobody really knew what was going on. It's like they booked this show on the day. They had something else and they threw it all out, because apparently WWE...
that would be classic Vince.
Yeah, but WWE trucks showed up the day of to get this all set up, and nobody really knew what was going on. So it looks like they had something kind of true, as you said, being the good guys, threw it as much as they could. And what's weird is, again, when there's only like 45 minutes of actual WCW in it, and then it goes to an extended, I think it's like half an hour long of Raw, because Raw was on an hour after Nitro. And
come here, can you tell me, so were the shows 2 hours or 3 hours in this?
2 hours, but WCW had an hour before. So WCW would start first, and then it was on for an hour.
So I was wondering, because after the simulcast and the buyout and all that, I was expecting WWF to go off the air, and then they were like, up next, Undertaker and Kane.
Like, no, because WCW actually went on an hour before. So they had a full hour unopposed, and then there was that crossover with the last hour. And that's what happened here. So when you're watching this on the network, you're not only getting Nitro, but you're also getting a big chunk of Raw.
Yeah.
And
you know what? I wouldn't even take that off them, because that half hour that they devoted to Raw was really compelling. You know, it was McMahon came out and did all the stuff like I thought one of the best things ever in wrestling is that thumbs up, thumbs down segment he did. Who wants me to bring over Sting?
Yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. The crowd was mad for Sting. Goldberg, the crowd was mad for Goldberg. Buff Bagwell gets a bloody pop.
Yeah, but he was over.
Crowd goes mad for Bagwell. Lex Luger. Crickets.
You know what is cool though? What is cool is that when you're watching this, and again, like the logistics of this can't really be undersold, right? How did you get the fans to stick around for an extra half an hour watching it? And if you actually have it in my notes, if you're watching the simulcast footage, when it cuts to Shane, you can tell a bunch of people have actually left. Like a lot of the bleachers are empty, so they must have actually gone on at some point. They went like, "Here, look, stick around. There's more on the show." So, because
I think part of the problem with the WCW broadcast.
Sorry, wouldn't you be kicking yourself if you left after the show?
Before the biggest moment.
Before the biggest moment of wrestling. Exactly, yeah. You're just like, oh, right, we go to the pub. You're like, what happened? It'd be hilarious.
I think part of the problem with the WCW broadcast was, though, amazing venue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, like,
really good venue, yeah.
Looked fantastic. But it came with a problem. And the problem was that it was on like Palm Beach during spring break, you know, great visuals and all that. But you ended up with about half the crowd who aren't actually wrestling fans. There were people who were there on spring break going, oh my God, there's a wrestling show on, let's go to it. They didn't really know the storylines. They didn't really understand the profundity of what was happening. So you had Ric Flair out there giving a really good, maybe a bit long, but a really good promo about the history of the NWA, the history of WCW, why this means so much, why even though we're beaten, we're still WCW, we never be WWF, blah, blah, blah. Like, giving this really impassioned promo, and half the crowd just didn't get it. Not because it was bad, just didn't know what the hell he was talking about, because they were spring breakers there for a good time. They weren't WCW diehards. Like I say, great venue, great visual, loved it. But by all rights, the final WCW should have been in Atlanta.
The thing about it is, this happened so fast, dude, that I genuinely think this was the only way they were able to scramble for something. And it probably was the kind of case where Vince was like, or WB was like, listen, we don't care what you do, just have it done before this time.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And that seems like that was the case, that like, you have this exact time, do whatever you're going to do, and then get off. Because if you notice,
I'm only talking about like in a perfect world. But 100%. You're right.
But if you notice when you're watching the show, Tony Schiavone never talks again. Like, the commentary team doesn't talk during the, like, once that kind of simulcast swaps over, because it kind of just cuts into the WWE feed, like, exclusively.
Oh yeah, that's it.
I would have genuinely actually preferred if they had left Tony Schiavone's mic on and Scott Hudson's mic on. That would have been way cooler for their reaction to it compared to JR. And,
oh god! Imagine Vince out there on WWF, run down WCW, talking about thumbs up, thumbs down, and Tony Schiavone speaking over it, going, "Oh my god, this is classless. What are you doing, Vince? This is."
But that would have been cool, because like, imagine the way I would have shot it. But then again, Vince's this is his magnum opus. This is his glory. His glory triumph through Rome. He has all the spoils. He wasn't going to let that be ruined for him. But what would have been cool from a storyline is if you're watching that through the Titantron or the Tron in the arena with Scott Hudson and Tony Schiavone talking about it. That would have been cool. That would have been a cool thing to be like, and then he could have, reset up the new lines and stuff. It would have been great, but they didn't do that. So
I think, look, this should have been momentous. This should have been incredible. It wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, and it's still, I hold that to this day, the first instance of Vince on WCW still holds a wow factor.
It does, yeah.
And the moment where Shane walks out still holds a wow factor.
It does.
But you're right. If this had been properly planned out, it could have been like all-time best pro wrestling ever. But like you said, this was all like WCW had only been bought officially like 4 days beforehand.
Yeah,
something like that. So you kind of give it a pass knowing that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can tell. I'm glad we watched the last Thunder and the last Nitro, because watching the last Thunder, it's just a normal show. They were just like, things are normal. We're gonna go. We're going to the next pay-per-view, right?
It's mad, wasn't it?
It's crazy. And then you watch Nitro, and it's like, hey, yeah, we have to get this done, and then we're out here. There's something interesting on the second last Nitro
featured a phone call from Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff wasn't even there.
No,
just a phone call from Eric Bischoff where he went, look, we don't know what's happening with WCW. I'm in the process of trying to buy WCW. I'm running into some speed bumps, and I'm hoping that those speed bumps don't become roadblocks. Yeah. So even at that stage, like, there were obviously everything was still up in the air.
Everything was still to play for. It was still an active moving situation. And it really wasn't until Shane walks out, or sorry, not Shane walks out. When you see Vince, you're like, oh, we're done here. Like, this is it, But even still, man, I think the show was good for what it has. It's a very historical. It's not the best wrestling show in the world. It really isn't. But it is one of the weirdest shows you can watch. And I'd say if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, do yourself a favor. Watch Greed. Watch the last couple episodes of Nitro and Thunder, because Thunder's actually, it's actually not bad. and you can really kind of get a full holistic view of what it was like.
And it's amazing, man. If WCW had a shutdown after Sin, or do you remember the real depth? Do you remember those terrible WCW shows we were in a couple of months ago? WCW had a shutdown, and I'd been like, good riddance.
Yeah.
No loss.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have even given a thought to the.
No, you would have been like
the decades of history of it. You'd have been like,
you're like, mercifully, it's over. You know,
mercy killing, take it out the back of the shed and shoot it. But what makes it genuinely sad is that the last couple of months, the last 2 pay-per-views, the last sort of half dozen episodes of Nitro and Thunder, this looked like a company that was turning itself around, that was accepting who it was. It's not the number one show, but it still has a huge audience. It still has, it looked like a company that and I'm loath to praise Bischoff, mainly because of his antics on Twitter, but if he had been able to buy it, I honest to God think he could have made something of it.
Yeah, and I think it would have been what AEW is now, legitimately. Like TNA had the potential to be that, and I know we talked a lot about TNA this show, but I mean it really is how I feel about it. And when we're talking about TNA specifically as well, doing those runs, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you guys are like never watched all TNA, I think AEW is what Bischoff probably had have seen in his mind, where he's like, this is modern WCW.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong being number 2 in a multi-billion-dollar industry.
But the thing about it is like, obviously that audience never went anywhere. The audience was always still there because it's watching AEW now.
Yeah,
and it was watching NXT before.
That audience, like myself, just went away for 20 years.
Yeah,
just like, I'm watching this crap. But it's like, there's no issue being number 2. Like me and you, neither of us are billionaires, but we're the number 2 podcast. We're quite content being millionaires. We don't need to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're okay with the M.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, Martin, that's going to do it for this this run of WCW here on the Rewind.
Are you trying not to say ARC because that's an OSW term?
Yeah, I'm trying to not get sued.
we should come up with. Do you remember the Warrior came into WCW?
Yeah,
and he came up with the One Warrior Nation, which is NWO backwards. We should come up with an acronym for WSO.
I love it. I think we're treading that line with Buckley anyway.
Buckley, oh yeah, just up to the lane.
Exactly. But again, next week we have our Clash of the Casual and also All Out show. And then after that, we're going to do the Ministry of Darkness playlist, which what I will do is I'll put up exactly what we're going to watch on our social media. Guys, the best way to keep saying, and again, we're going to get more active on it on the Twitter and on Facebook. Go to our social media, nerdtoknowmedia.com or thewrestlingrewind.com. You can find everything there. And you follow them, like them. We're going to be a lot more active on that and kind of telegraphing what we're going to be doing in the future as well. And we will be live next week taking phone calls and taking chats as well. Martin, is there anything you want to plug before we get out here?
I just want to given the fact that we did berate WCW for so long, and it did end on a genuinely, not a high note, but a kind of a sad note, I would like us all to take a minute to lower the flag and listen to the last post. No, I'm only joking. I'm not going to make you listen to the last post. But yeah, 21 gun salute for WCW. Slongafoil and Mahara. And we'll see you around the Christmas.
There's the closing time we could play. Closing time.
Bankrupt time.
I might actually put that in. Guys, thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll be back next week again here on PXI 2.5 FM, the True Penny channel, and of course, Nerds No Media, thewrestlingrewind.com. Bye, guys.
I know Thank you for listening to a Nerd to Know Media production.